What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're looking at early squad building tips. So these are some things to think about when you're making your drafts early on, but also some things you just do not need to be thinking about this early on. You don't need to be wasting brain power on them. I did ask in the video I put out earlier today, my best value players for 2,500 likes, and you did deliver, so this video is going out the same day. Thank you very much for that. If you enjoy this one, make sure to give it a like as well and help me hit 300,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. Now, before we jump into the draft building tips, I did want to talk about one other tip. And I know this is a cheesy segue, right? But Fantasy Football Scout is a website that I have used for a very long time. I've been making content on YouTube for 5 years and I've been partnered with them ever since. But I've been using the site for 10 years and there's a lot of great tools in here. Now, there's so many that I can't go through all of them in this one video. I will be using them throughout pre-season to kind of show you how they work. But there's a ton of stuff in here, and if you want to sign up, there is a handy link at the top of the description to get signed up. You can either pay monthly or yearly, depending on how you want to do it, and make use of these tools throughout the whole of pre-season. So if I just check where my mouse is, yeah, here we go. So the kind of main ones that I use it for, stats tables. So you can build different tables to show you different stats for different players, different teams, different positions. So for example, I have this attackers one where I can basically look at the stats for a whole load of different players and I can narrow it down later on if I want. This is for all matches last season. Throughout this season, you could start looking at the last match, the last 4 matches, the last 6 matches. For all of you that like form and stuff like that, this will help you look through. So I have all the expected data stats and stuff like there in as well. There's also comparison tools. So if there's particular players you want to compare, you can absolutely do that, right? So if I just click on Saka, for example, you can select different players, but it's already populated Zaha and James Maddison, and you compare them like for like. Basically, again, for the whole of last season, you could look at the second half of last season, however you want to do it, right? And if you look at that down at these tools on the left, there's a rate my team function, there's a season ticker, which you can look at certain amount of game weeks as well. I'm going to use that in my fixtures video too. There's team stats, player stats, there's a whole load of stuff in here. There's also members articles, members videos, and all that good stuff as well. So if you want to check out Fantasy Football Scout, click that link in the description. I would highly recommend it. Okay, so let's talk about locked-in players first of all. So this is any players that are almost certainly going to be in your Game Week 1 squad no matter what happens apart from possibly an injury, right? So for me, there's lots of players I like. João Cancelo, Andrew Robertson, Reece James, Ben Chilwell, the list goes on. Loads of £8 million midfielders, Kulusevski, Saka, Foden. I like them all. But none of those players are 100% locked into my Game Week 1 squad bar an injury. The only 2 players that are locked in right now is Mo Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold. And that is it, right? For obvious reasons. One of them for Salah is captaincy. For Trent, it's just consistency, attack and returns, etc. So my advice would be don't build drafts without them, right? Because this is what people do. And I don't really understand it. So let's say you've got this squad. Okay, your squad might look a little bit different. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this. You've built your squad. You've got your 2 locked-in players, Trent and Salah. But then people go and do this, right? So they say, okay, well, Trent is 7.5 million. If I change into a different Liverpool defender, let's say Van Dijk, then I've got an extra million to spend, right? Mo Salah, okay, he's quite expensive. Rather than go for him, I will go for an £8 million midfielder instead, which is James Maddison. Well, hang on a second. Now my overall squad balance looks really good and I've got 6 million in the bank. Let's see what I can do with that. So let's go from Raya. We'll put in Edison if I change the team properly. So we'll put Edison in goal. Still got 5 million to spend. We can swap out Neto to another £8 million midfielder. So if we go to just £8 million mids and I get rid of Edison there, I don't know. We'll put in Mason Mount. We still got 2.5 million to spend elsewhere. So maybe you put, I don't know, Perisic up to Robertson as well. And what happens? I won't do this for every single player, right? We still got £1 million to spend. But what happens is you take out those really expensive players and you have what you think looks on paper as a better overall squad, but you forget why you had those locked-in players in the first place, right? So value at the bottom there, I've put value doesn't always mean cheap. So there are lots of value players. I spoke about them in a video earlier today. Players that you think are going to score way more points than their price suggests. But there is value in consistent returns. There is value in consistent minutes. There's value in consistent output. And there's certainly value in captaincy. So Mo Salah on a points per million basis probably won't be right up the top come the end of the season, because there will be some cheap player that scores a hell of a lot of points. But with Mo Salah, what you know you're getting is consistent returns. In the easier matches, is going to be a great captaincy option, and I know that I'm going to need him. So spending time building drafts without him that look good on paper that you're never going to go with later on seems like a bit of a waste of time. Obviously, FPL is supposed to be fun. If you find that fun, great. But for a lot of people, it seems to almost kind of confuse matters. And last, I would say you shouldn't probably have right now too many absolutely locked-in players. You need to be open to new information that might also change your mind as well. Okay, maybe let's look at some other details, maybe a few smaller details as well when building your squad. One thing I would say is don't focus too much on very minor details, i.e. which is the best 4.5 million midfielder, which is the best 4 million goalkeeper, because during pre-season, you're going to make a lot of changes to your squad, right? It could be formation changes, structures changes, more money on the bench, less money on the bench, more money in defence, less money in defence, etc., etc. You're going to be trying to find out who's the best £8 million midfielder, who's the best striker, is Jesus better than Saka? All these questions are going to come up, and they are probably what's going to score you the majority of your points. Which 4.5 million midfielder you have, which 4 million goalkeeper are probably going to be very minor in terms of your overall FPL points. So again, when I've built my squad here, if I make changes to this, let's say I go from Saka to Jesus and I go for a 4.5 million midfielder instead of a 4.5 million forward, I will give that right now literally zero thought into which player that will be, because by the time we get to game week 1, like a few days before, maybe even a week before, the best players will show themselves. And a good example of that is right now we've got transfer, speculation, talk, rumours, etc. and some moves that are probably going to go through as well. So as soon as Andreas Pereira from Man United was linked to a move to Fulham, and it looks like that's going to go through, he's only 4.5 million. Suddenly everyone's talking about him as the best midfielder, and that kind of conversation will always happen. Nico Williams moving to, I think it's Nottingham Forest, he's a £4 million defender. Suddenly everybody already knows now who the best £4 million defender probably will be, who's also going to get minutes. It's Nico Williams. So I don't spend too much brain power worrying about those minor positions which aren't going to get me too many points anyway, because it's just pointless. You're going to think of so many other things and make so many other changes. They are micro or minor details that you can just worry about later on. And similarly, right, and I'm not trying to say don't think about anything here, but if you've got a squad where no matter what, you're going to want an £8 million midfielder, right now it doesn't really matter who that is. You can play around with formations and structure and stuff like that. Which £8 million midfielder, that might change a few times as we go through pre-season. The Community Shield, Liverpool versus Man City, that is going to take place before the season starts. And we're all human. If Foden goes and gets a brace, or Mahrez goes and gets a brace in that game, your head might be turned, and suddenly that £8 million midfielder you've had locked in the whole time gets changed to someone else. That does bring me on to my new next point though, which is do try and take in new information and ask yourself whether it really changes anything. If you think that Saka or Kulusevski or Maddison, whoever it might be, is the best £8 million option, and Mahrez or Foden goes and gets a brace in the Community Shield or during pre-season, is that really new information? You already know they're quite good. You know they can score goals. Should that change your thinking? And that can be the same for kind of any position at all. So again, I come back to this squad. I think that Ben Chilwell and Reece James are really good options no matter whether they're playing wing back or 4 at the back. But if I see in pre-season actually they're struggling to get used to the new formation, they don't quite look as maybe good at the back as they were, whatever it is, right? One's getting more forward than the other one. If there's genuine new information, that might make me change my mind. If it's not genuinely good or new information, then I should really take note of that about whether I should make those changes. And that is why I would say keep a note on your early drafts, not every single one, but maybe some of your early ones, and reasons for your choices. Because if you're going to change one of those players that's been in your draft for nearly the whole of pre-season, there should probably be a good reason. That shouldn't be fear of missing out. It shouldn't be because of high ownership to another player. It should only be because you think genuinely that other player is going to get you more points, and that is it. So yeah, don't worry too much about micro details, who your cheap midfielder, cheap forward is going to be. I'm telling you now, all those things will work themselves out before game week 1. So I spent a lot of time basically telling you not to worry or think about anything because it'll all work itself out. But what are some things that you should be thinking about fairly early on? So one thing is the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season, right? You don't really need to plan any longer than that. I know there's quite a bit of talk about how the season is almost split into quarters at the moment because you've got that first wildcard that has to be used before the World Cup. Then after the World Cup, you're going to get unlimited transfers, which is essentially a wildcard. And then you've got your second wildcard as well. So people are saying you should only look at the first 8 weeks, but you should only look at that as a maximum anyway. There's no point in thinking about, I need this player in my team because in game week 7, they've got a great fixture. You've got transfers. Things are going to happen early in the season that make your moves different to what you might have planned anyway. So looking beyond 4 to 6 weeks for captaincy, for defensive players, for where your clean sheets are going to come from, for me, it's pointless looking really any more than that. Four weeks might be a little bit small, but 6 weeks for me is probably the maximum that I'll be looking at. And often you'll see on the graphics, I usually list the next 6 game weeks and not too much more than that. You also need to think about who your captains are going to be. Who do you need and who is more of a want? And that is important because you're not going to be able to select every single premium player that you want. So again, if we come onto the FPL page and we look at the fixtures, I would go through and maybe make a note of who you think maybe are the top 2 or top 3 captains. And whichever players come out the most, they should be the priority to be in your team. Because people, I still think to a certain extent, overlook captaincy. It's extremely important. So in game week 1, for example, Liverpool are playing Fulham away. For me, Mo Salah is a great captaincy that day. And then I would probably focus more on the top teams to see what their fixtures are. So, for example, Man City have got West Ham away. It's maybe a little bit more difficult, although Man City always score goals. And the other kind of team that a lot of people will be looking potentially for captain is Spurs. So Spurs versus Southampton is pretty good. Then you kind of got to decide whether you think Salah or Kane or Son is the better option. If you think it's Salah, that means in some way Son or Kane, they're not bad options, but because of their price, they might not be worth looking at as much because you're not going to captain them, right? You can only captain one player every single week. Then I'd move on to game week 2. Again, I'd look at the same team. So Liverpool have got Crystal Palace at home. It's an okay fixture. I would never back against Salah at home, but Crystal Palace are not that easy of a team to face. Spurs have got Chelsea away, so again, you wouldn't want to captain Kane or Son in that game. So straight away, you've just said, well, I've just said, right, maybe I'm putting thoughts into your head. Salah's a great captain for game week 1, therefore I don't necessarily need Kane or Son. Doesn't mean they're definite no's, but they're not as valuable. And I also don't need them for captaincy in game week 2 either, whereas Man City play Bournemouth. So maybe Haaland then becomes higher up the list, and so on, right? Game week 3, we'll do this as the last week. Salah's got Man United away. Based on what happened last season, that could be a good fixture or not, depending on what you feel. Spurs have got Wolves at home, and Man City got Newcastle away. So right now I'm thinking Salah game week 1, Haaland game week 2, and then game week 3 is maybe fairly close between Kane, Son and Haaland. So maybe because of that, because I don't want to captain Kane or Son in any earlier weeks, maybe I just see Haaland as the second best option. It all depends how you value those fixtures, but that is kind of what I would be looking at for captaincy. Who do you need and who do you want? So I'd love to have Salah, Son and Haaland, but it probably isn't going to work, right? Because it's just too much money. When you are building your squad, I would work backwards all the time. So again, I come back to this squad I built earlier. Again, Salah and Trent are locked in, right? They're really good options. Then I would start putting in who your next favourite kind of couple of players are. So for some of you, it'll be João Cancelo. For some people, it might be also putting Robertson in. However way you do it, right? Let's say it's Perisic. I would try and put in the most important players to you in first, and then fill in the gaps afterwards. Don't start, like, if you've got a space for a £6 million midfielder once you've put all the other players in, there's no point in then looking at all the £7 million midfielders. Again, you're using extra brain power, extra thinking time on players you can't fit into your squad anyway. So that's usually how I build my squads. I also like to put in as many cheap players as possible just to see what I can do with like my first 11. So I will usually have like a £4 million keeper and a 4.5 million midfielder. So I'll fill them in and then I'll try and spend the rest of the money. So if I put in lots of players that I like, and then I've got space for a goalkeeper more than 4.5, then I'll start considering whether the 4.5 or 5 million goalkeepers are better, right? And we will look into specifics of best players as we go through pre-season. I'm trying to keep this kind of a little bit broader for those of you that are trying to build your squad early on. And that's kind of what I mean by that fourth point, right? Picking players based on what you need. If you've got a 4.5 million defender spot, there's no point in necessarily looking at the 5 million defenders unless there's somewhere else you're happy to downgrade. And if you're not, don't waste time looking at it. And then also, this kind of ties into fixtures for the first 4 to 6 weeks. But you need to think about how often you might actually need your bench players. So again, let's just say defense is usually a place where you might need your bench players a little bit more often. So I'm going to go, just for this example, I'm going to go for a slightly cheaper bench. I'm going to put Trippier in there as well. Cancelo, Perisic. Let's just say that's it, right? And I want to play 4 at the back most weeks. And I'm going to play Trent, Cancelo and Perisic every game because they're so attacking. I expect them to start whatever, right? Whether or not you think that too, let's just say they will. So I look at Trippier, who is good, but he's not so good that you necessarily want to play him in bad fixtures as well. So I take a quick look at the fixtures, and suddenly I realise in game week 3, it's Man City at home, and game week 5, it's Liverpool away. They are not fixtures that I want to play Trippier in, not in an ideal situation anyway. So then when I'm looking to fill this 5th gap, and I want a 4.5 million defender, I need someone who has a good fixture in game week 3 and game week 5 to cover Trippier. So one player that's been looked at a lot is Tomiyasu, right? He was in my best value players. He's got Bournemouth away and Villa at home. That's probably okay, right? There's other 4.5 million defenders as well. So we're not going to go through all of them right now, but let's just take a look at Leicester. So Castagna, for example, game week 3, Southampton at home. Game week 5, Man United at home. So he's a bit more of an attacking defender compared to Tomiyasu, but maybe that Man United at home fixture just isn't quite as good as what Tomiyasu has. So he would then be the 4.5 million defender that I pick, right? Without giving it too much thought right now for the purposes of this video. So yeah, when you look at bench players, think about how often you're actually going to need them, specifically for defense, because if you do go for a slightly cheaper option, they are less likely to be someone that you want to play every week. So you need that bench player to fit in exactly when you need them, basically, when your other player has bad fixtures. So there we go. Hopefully those tips were useful. If they were, please do make sure to like the video and obviously hit that subscribe button because there is a hell of a lot of content coming throughout the rest of pre-season and during the FPL season as well. I know this was kind of broad specifics rather than particular players, but we will talk about best cheap players, best premium players, captains and all that kind of stuff throughout pre-season. So make sure to stay tuned. And like I said earlier on in the video, if you want to check out Fantasy Football Scout, which I would recommend, there is a link in the description below to get that done as well. Otherwise, I will catch you tomorrow for another video. Thank you for watching.